Matt, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, really? Really? This is what you wrote? This is your contribution to Rebels? Well, I guess it's better than most, but still, I mean, basically, the Empire shows up, the Rebels get away, there's a new Inquisitor, and Ahsoka and Rex are reunited. Kanan somehow all of a sudden likes clones. The end. That's it. And normally I wouldn't get upset, but I feel like writing for children's television isn't Matt's fit. And because this episode's just so devoid of character and substance. And I think of this novel, which, okay, Katie Lucas wrote, but point is, Clone Wars, this feels like something from season 1 where it's simple, very substanceless, with a couple exceptions. Most of season 1 was just versus evil, but I mean the Umbara arc. Like so many times I've seen Matt write episodes where it's so character driven, and and I'm not really sure what's going on up there, but this is not the same. I don't know if it was George Lucas, Disney, the new audience, the new tone, but this show just, sometimes I'm okay with it, but most of the time I just don't do it for me. I mean, a lot more stood out to me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, for children it's fine, but it's like, and for Star Wars fans, as a Star Wars thing, it's passable, but this is not something I'm going to go recommend my friends the way I'm going to recommend this. But I think what it's boiling down to is I think these writers, they're thinking like Star Wars fans, not like writers. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, is they're thinking more, okay, what would be cool to see in Star Wars rather than what would be a good character story moment. In other words, they're doing the opposite of Avatar, in the sense that Avatar was a show with rich, detailed characters that happened to be set in a fantasy world. In other words, it wasn't so much about this world as it was about these characters. The writers were constantly thinking of where could we go and what could we do with these characters, not like what cool bending things can we do in this episode. I mean, they thought that, but it was always in service of characters. And here, like, Filoni says in the behind-the-scenes video, Rebels Recon, that the idea for this episode was totally, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had an AT and AT-AT fight? And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but I mean, you're not making a dumb action movie. I mean, Star Wars, for as much as I like it for the action, the vehicles, and the worlds, I always like to see characters, and it really worries me when I hear Filoni saying, wouldn't it be cool if we had this vehicle do this thing, as opposed to, wouldn't it be cool if we go here with Kanan or explore this with Ezra? And I mean, they said they're going to do that this season, but this just seems more like the bam, bam, bam that Star Wars. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were bits of character moment, but honestly, I just saw someone just letting the Star Wars fanboy consume them and stop making like a writer. Like, I guess being in the original trilogy is like making all the writers like fanboy. Sorry, I'm being a little too cynical. Like, but here's an example. Here's an example of two Star Wars ideas. One's, okay, wouldn't it be cool if Leia was fighting Darth Vader? Like, I just so want to see them fight. I want to see Leia, like, use a blaster and start shooting Vader, or pick up a lightsaber and start fighting him, versus, how about we do a story where we see Leia coping with the loss of Alderaan, the fact that her people aren't there. One's just, hey, here's this cool idea for an action scene or set piece, and one's, hey, here's this cool idea of cool exploration of character. And the problem with this episode is that the entire idea of it is either that or Clone Wars service, which I love Clone Wars, but I feel like I'd expect better from these writers, that they'd be smart enough to, for as much as they love the Clone Wars, to be able to move on and go on to something else. Because look at Legend of Korra. For as much as the fans wanted them to bring back Avatar, the writers like, we'll give a bit of it, but we're going to focus more on these new characters in this new story, and we'll give a bit of classic Avatar, but mostly it'll be like in a minor background bit. Whereas here, like, this episode was so clone-centric, and that I feel like Kanan and everyone else got lost. Like, seriously, Sabine is still so underdeveloped. She's still just sort of there. I mean, I enjoy seeing the clones, but again, they had their story. I want to see these new characters. If I want to see Rex, I'll watch the Clone Wars. I'll watch Bad Batch. I'll watch I'll watch whatever. I'll watch the Wookiee arc, which hopefully will get released soon. And there was so much recycling. I guess it's cute doing some visual nods to the Clone Wars, but again, so much of this from the don't trust your eyes. Like, it's like, I've seen this before. Give me something new! And new in terms of, and by new I mean give me unique and creative characters. Don't, like, do cool mashups or recycle or do spins on scenarios we haven't seen. But yeah, so let me get to something a criticism that the show could. First off, I do the criticism that may or may not change, which is Kanan. Kanan watched the clones, and again, this is something that the writers could fix, but it seems like Kanan's done a full 180, and if he is, I'm like, shame on you, writers. Shame on you that you are gonna have Kanan just do a complete 180 in just 2 episodes. Kanan saw his master, who he was deeply attached to, gunned down by clones and traumatized him. And you're expecting me to believe that he is totally gonna accept the clones in just 2 episodes. And you're like, well, Jacob, you're J Star Wars 360. You're being crazy. And I'm like, okay, let's look at the last Avatar: The Last Airbender. When Zuko is joining Team Avatar, Katara does not want Zuko to join it. The whole time she's like, I do not want him. I do not want him. He is Fire Nation. Fire Nation bad. Again, very similar to Clone Rebels. We have a character not wanting to accept someone in the group because they're associated with another group who killed someone close to the character. By the end of the episode, Katara's agreed to let Zuko join the group, but she still doesn't like it. She's like, okay, we need Zuko. I'm not happy about it, but I understand that we need Zuko, so I'm going to let him join under that principle. And even then, it took like a few episodes before she finally warmed up and was willing to accept Zuko as a person. And I feel like we should have gotten that with Kanan. Like, he's like, we're not gonna, I don't know, he's like smiling at the end. I'm like, no, Kanan should still be uncomfortable with clones. I mean, if we can have him agree, like, okay, morally it's right to out of moral obligation I'm saving them, but I don't think out of the kindness of Kanan's heart he should be fully turned around and accepting clones. Again, if we see in a later episode that Kanan's like still not a clone fan, I'll be willing to forgive this. But if Kanan's like full 180, totally cool with clones, I'm gonna be like face palming myself because that's not smart writing. I mean, just look at how much Ventress had to go through before she was willing to let others help her. Like, half of this freaking novel is Ventress just learning to the point where she's starting out, I don't need anyone. By halfway, she's like, okay, I need someone. It happened over time, over a long time. Don't expect me to believe that just one episode is just suddenly gonna flip Kanan around. Oh, whatever. This is show's written for toddler. This is like elementary school reading, and which it leads me to another thing. There were there's still all the cheesy moments on this that stuff. Like Ezra's like, we should work together. I'm like, only on a children's show would you spell out something that obvious. And then there's the moment where the speeder runs away and the clone's like, hey, wait for me. I'm like, I mean, I know you're trying to do a fun Star Wars show, but even on a Star Wars show, like, that's... Even in the original trilogy, you never would see something like that. That's something I'd see in Lego Star Wars, where it's supposed to be cartoony over top. But, yeah, like, it just feels too goofy to have the clones doing that. Not clones, rebels. So yeah, writers, please think in terms of characters, not in terms of story. And if I were to give this episode anything, music's good, animation looks good. I mean, it definitely looks better. There's a lot more detail. From the clone's armor to the facial expressions, minus a couple towards the end where Hera's face just looked really stiff. Like, Kanan. Like, that's what the faces look like in some of the episodes. I'm like, you would never see that on Clone Wars, which kind of shows that for as much as Rebels tries to have good animation, like, it doesn't quite have the detail on as Clone Wars, although I did like the effects in the dust storm, like, that did look kind of nice, and the walkers, and like, I felt like that was a good visual moment that sort of hides the limitations of it, and if you're saying Clone Wars isn't, Rebels and Clone Wars, it's not fair to compare the animation. It is when the Wookiees look... When the textures on the Wookiees are very dull and boring in Rebels, and they look much better in Clone Wars. Or Hondo has this bland design in Rebels where there's a lot of detail on him in Clone Wars. I think this episode also suffered just from the fact that a fair amount of the moments from the Walker reveal to the Rebels taking down the Walker by slicing it, to Rex shooting one. All that was shown in the trailer, so a lot of the surprise element was lost to me. We also have a new villain. Don't really care for him at the moment. I mean, we don't know anything about who he is or what he is. I mean, he's essentially boring Inquisitor villain 2.0. I mean, that could change. I mean, I'm hoping in next episode they'll do something to flesh out his character. Because I really want an interesting villain. But we'll have to wait and see. So again, I'm not mad at the episode. Because honestly, I mean, it's just a shoulder shrug. But I'm just more annoyed because I feel like this show just gets a lot more credit than it deserves. And especially considering this is the same team that gave us Clone Wars. I expect a lot more in terms of quality of writing and characters. I mean, if you want to watch a really good... I mean, this is like... If you want to watch a really good show on Disney XD, watch Gravity Falls. Hopefully next episode will bring it back. Because, again, I did enjoy the Siege of Lothal, and I thought Lost Commanders was okay. So leave your thoughts in the comments below. Please don't be hateful. Just constructively criticize if you have any criticism. Like, dislike, subscribe. And this is JStar260.